What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy Jay Spence, the King. My co-host Joe Miller is not going to be with us today. He's somewhere in Orlando partying with John Fina, so he's dissing us this week. But I have a worthy special guest this week, the one, the only, Mr. Sal Capaccio. What's going on, sir?
Hey, how are you, man? Good to be with you.
Man, I'm having a good time this week and looking forward to this weekend's game. I know it's been busy for you. I know we could talk about just all the media, everything that's been happening. Before we do, what about this game that we just had, man? Like, what? I'm gonna just jump right into it. Like, why was that game so doggone close?
I think that anytime you have familiarity to division rivals, they're gonna know each other. And as much as Bills fans wanted to think they'd walk all over Miami with backup linemen and a third string quarterback, all it takes is for a team to make a couple of plays and they start to build confidence, and then the game starts to turn. And that's what happened. Miami made a couple of plays, but the Bills gave them plays. The Bills made critical mistakes, and you can't do that. It's playoff football. Anything could happen. This is the NFL. If we've ever learned anything, we should know, dude, that anything can happen in any game in the National Football League, right? I mean, the Bills went to Jacksonville and lost last year. We saw that. Went to the Jets this year and lost. Not as egregious, but these things happen all the time. And I think the game was close because the Bills gave opportunities to Miami, and Miami capitalized on those opportunities, and then grew in some confidence. And the Bills got a little bit tight there. So, I think that this is what you can expect from here on out.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's the playoffs too. It's like the best at this point, the cream of the crop. So it's everybody who is supposed to be there at this point. And I think this weekend's game is one of the I think it's one of the most hyped games, obviously, because the week 17 matchup was canceled due to, the DeMar Hamlin injury, but
Mhm.
everybody was looking forward to it. So, your expectations this weekend, what are you looking forward to seeing from the Bills perspective? Because, I feel like I'm not nervous about any team, but I feel like if there's a game that I am a little concerned with, is this one against this team.
So what I expect is for them to get back to hopefully paying a little more close attention to detail. We talk about um the interceptions, obviously, and the turnover by Josh, right? I mean, but not all the interceptions were on him. I think that the second one, maybe Cole Beasley should make the catch. DB makes a nice play, but little things like that. Maybe the route needs to be a little bit crisper. How about the kickoff from Tyler Bass? That kind of started everything, right?
Yeah.
Those are little things that need to be paid attention. The drop by Khalil Shakir, the drop by Dawson Knox. I expect this team to pay a little bit more attention to detail this week and to be a little bit more buttoned up. That doesn't guarantee anything, but I do expect that a little bit. I expect them to come up with a game plan that really forces the Cincinnati Bengals to, have to try to run the ball and say, we're not going to give you anything passing, and, try to take advantage of that offensive line. But, this is going to be a very, very tough opponent, a very, very tough out. As the week's gone on, I've kind of liked the Bills' chances a little more considering the offensive line for the Bengals and what the Bills, the opportunity that is there for them. But that's the biggest thing I expected, which is this Bills team to be not as not make as many critical mistakes. I think hopefully they learn their lesson, and you can't guarantee anything. Those things can happen in football games, but at least to be a little more attention to detail this week.
Yeah, and you know what? You bring up the offensive line of the Bengals, and for some reason, I don't know where I thought I saw this statistic somewhere, but I thought that the Bills, obviously we haven't had as many sacks, but I still thought that we were one of the top teams at getting, pressure on the quarterback with just the front four. We've
Mhm.
dropped dramatically. I actually finally saw the stat, and we went from like top four in that category down to like 27th or 26th. Um, I hope that we could take advantage of this offensive line being beat up a bit. What are you seeing as far, because I thought Shaq was playing lights out. I thought Groot was playing big. Obviously, losing Von is a big deal, but what can we do to improve that?
Well, I think that's the big thing. They lose Vaughn, and you go from those numbers. What, it's a fourth down to 24th or eighth down to 24th, whatever you said. I think that's why you lose Von Miller. He's so good. Let's remember, having Von Miller just opens things up for everybody else. You have to concentrate on Von Miller if you're an offense. You have to game plan for Von Miller if you're an offense. You don't do that for the other guys. Suddenly you do that, you double team him. Now things open up for Ed Oliver. They open up for Jordan Phillips. They open up for Shaq Lawson or Greg Rousseau. I think that's what's been missing. You don't have to necessarily just concentrate on one guy. on this Bills. Not to saying they're all easily blockable one-on-one, but if one starts to hurt you, you can do it. But when Von Miller's out there, it really changes the dynamic. So the Bills have had to blitz a little bit more. They've had to manufacture some pass rush. Last week I heard a lot of people say, well, they should have really done a lot better against that Miami offensive line. I don't know if they were necessarily just trying to pin their ears back against that Miami offensive line. I think what they were trying to do was say, look, we are confident that we can stop Skylar Thompson throwing the ball. So we're not going to give you anything in the run game. And I think the D-line did a really good job. Miami averaged 2.1 yards a carry. I mean, that's just incredibly low. And I think the D-line said, we're going to stop the run game when we have opportunities. We'll get after the quarterback. But, if they would have pinned their ears back and just flew upfield, that would have opened up holes for the run game. I think this week might be a little bit different, though. I think this week you might be looking at those guys trying to penetrate, get into Joe Burrow, because that you're not going to want them throwing it to those playmakers they have on the outside. And Joe Burrow's not going to look to run the ball. He can extend plays sometimes a little bit, but he's not a runner. So I think, the quicker you can get to him, the better it's going to be for the Bills.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping we can take advantage of that, because I feel like in a game like this, anytime I've seen the Bengals not play well is because they couldn't really protect Joe Burrow.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime he's protected, forget about it. Like the offense just they look great, and they have some weapons. I know Bills fans, because I brag a lot about Stephon Diggs, and I brag a lot about Gabriel Davis in the playoffs, but the Bengals have some good wide receivers as well, and we've been really great against the run this season. But I'll tell you, if they can get the run going with those two running backs, they have two guys that can make things happen. So I don't know. I guess that's why I have a little bit of nerves going into this game. I still think that we win. I think we absolutely can win.
Yeah, I mean, they have a tremendous offense. You don't have to say Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. We know that. Obviously Hayden Hurst at tight end. I love their running backs, but the fact is, Spence, they haven't run the ball that great. They're bottom 5 in the league in rushing yards per game and rushing yards per play. They have struggled to run the ball, and I think the Bills are going to me, the path to victory for the Bills here is to dare them to and to challenge them to and say, look, you haven't run the ball all year very well. You are without offensive linemen. We're just not going to let you throw the ball. I wouldn't even be surprised if they go every once in a while, maybe 6 DBs, play a little dime defense and say, flood it and say, we're just going to take away. They love the quick game. They love the underneath stuff. Take all that away and say, we're going to dare you to run the football. Invite them to run the football a little bit, if you will, because they just haven't done it. I'm a big Joe Mixon fan, but if you look at it, Joe Mixon one time in his career, has averaged more than 4.1 yards a carry in a season, or maybe 4.3, but it's been low. He had a great second year in the league. He was close to 5 yards a carry. Other than that, they just have not run the ball very well. And this year, again, they're near the bottom of the league in that category. So I would challenge them to do that. I would challenge the Cincinnati Bengals to try and run the ball, even invite them to, and say, the more they can run the ball and not throw it, the better it is for the Bills.
Okay, yeah, because it's out of Joe Burrow's hands for sure.
That's right.
So, yeah, no, you're right. We want that. And then also defensively, I've been really impressed with Kyer. We haven't seen him a lot throughout the season like we wanted to. Early on, we got a chance to see him, but then lately he's come on and I think he's been playing great. Do you think the Buffalo Bills you think we're going to see a lot of Kyer Elam this weekend?
Good question. I'd like to see it. But let's go by past performances of what this coaching staff likes to do. They like to rotate Kyer and Dane. And I think Dane has become a little bit more the safer choice for them. He's got a little more experience. He's been in these big games, but the more experience Kyer gets and the more he plays well, I think he's earned that right to play. And Sean McDermott always talks about earning the right. And it's not to say that Dane Jackson hasn't. I think that's the rub here, which is, as much as Kyer Elam has played really well, I don't think you could look at the last couple of weeks and say Dane Jackson hasn't. He's had a couple of rough patches along the way, but I don't think he's played poorly the last couple of weeks either. So I would like to see Kyer Elam. I think he can be a little bit more physical with his length. He's not a super physical guy, but he can tackle. He's a little longer. I think he's more athletic, and that probably is a better matchup on a guy like T. Higgins. 6'4", 220. That's a guy that you're going to have to match up a little bit against. Obviously, the Bills will play a lot of zone defense, but when you need to, I would be more confident with a guy like Kyer. The problem is he is a rookie. He might make a mistake, and that could wind up, being 6 in your own end zone. I think that's what the Bills have to balance that against.
Yeah, and I mean, they have that big playability, kind of like us. When you have a Diggs or you have Gabe Davis who can do it, it's the same thing over there with Cincinnati. Couple more questions about the game, and then I wanted to kind of go in a different direction with you with the conversation tonight. First year All-Pro for Matt Milano. He's had a huge year. How do you I guess because so the debate that I've been having with people has been that he's just been pretty much just good everywhere, and I know he kind of has this label as a cover linebacker. How have you noticed the change in his or the improvement in his game this season as opposed to previous years?
Yeah, I don't know who's calling him just a cover linebacker. People say that they're not really watching and haven't been for the last 5 years. Matt Milano is an eraser, I think. I think he does everything very well. He's actually the only negative on Matt Milano this year is he missed 100 tackles by one. He had 99 at the end of the year. He almost had 100 and would have had it. Obviously, if the game in Cincinnati counts, he would have been over 100 tackles this year. Tremaine Edmonds actually did have over 100 tackles, but when you add in what Milano can do covering, he's been
Yeah,
terrific this year as a cover linebacker. I think he always has been. He's a 3-down linebacker. You could put him in any situation. It's so tough to get the recognition as an off-ball linebacker in this league. You talk about guys like Fred Warner and Roquan Smith. We always know about them. Well, they're the guys in the conversation every year. And now Matt's in that with him because he is a first-team All-Pro with those two guys. Obviously, Roquan gets the contract. I know the Bills re-signed Matt Milano just a couple of years ago for 10 to 11 million a year. Right now, that seems like an unbelievable steal.
yeah,
Considering what guys are getting now in their contracts. So I think where his improvement may have come, I don't know if it's an improvement. I think the improvement is the Bills have been better up front, giving him more opportunities. And, this defense is predicated upon the defensive line kind of tying up the offensive line, allowing those linebackers to use their athleticism, go sideline to sideline. And I think that's where Matt's really come into play. I would say, though, I think that if you could point to something but this is no fault of his own, they just haven't used him like this till this year, blitzing. I think Matt Milano's become a good blitzer and he gets home
yeah,
to the quarterback. Remember that hit he had on Mike White, right? And then he
yeah.
had 2 sacks against Miami in the playoff game. So I'm not sure I wouldn't say he's not been a good blitzer. They just never used him in that role, Spence. I think so now. I think that's coming to fruition as well.
And you know what? I don't think the Bills have. I mean, obviously, especially when we had Vaughn out there, we try to get to the quarterback with 4. But I think even if they wanted to use Tremaine in that aspect more, I think Tremaine would excel because not every time, but lots of times when we've seen him actually blitz, he disrupts the play. Whether he gets the sack or not, the play is disrupted. He's a disruptor over the middle in general, though. Like guys won't even throw over the middle when Tremaine is out there. So yeah, you're right about sorry, wrong comment here. You're right about Matt being a steal with that contract. Dan Freddie wants to know, Bills fans know a lot about the Bengals offense. DJ Reader aside, what do we need to be concerned about that their defense does well?
Well, I'm glad you said DJ Reader aside because you made it tough on me now because I would have said DJ Reader is great. I love DJ Reader. He's a great player. You go back to that Houston playoff game in 2019. He was a problem. I think he'll be a bit of an issue for the Bills. I think the Bills do have problems with bigger defensive linemen who really are kind of stout and strong against the run. I think that's why they have a little bit of trouble against the Jets. I think Raekwon Davis in the middle of Miami's defense, those guys are tough. And that's how the Bills are going to have a game plan for him. The other thing they do well, though, is their safeties are very good. They have good safeties. They can really kind of take away. They've really done a good job of taking away another team's number 1 receiver, but that does leave the number 2 receiver with opportunities. So that's something they do well is they kind of shade and concentrate on taking away your best option in the passing game. And they've done a very good job of that this year. So I think the Bills are going to probably have to figure out ways to move the ball without Stephon Diggs at times. Hey, the Dolphins did a good job last week. 1 target for Stephon Diggs in the second half. He had no catches after that monster first half. This may be a kind of a game where the whole game might have to be like that. Remember, Kansas City did that last year in the playoffs that the Bills lost. Stephon only had 3 targets. He had caught 2 balls or caught 3 balls, whatever it was, the whole game. But you know what happened in that game? Gabe Davis obviously had his incredible performance. So this could be a Gabe Davis game and a slot receiver game, and that's probably Cole Beasley, but whoever. I think those guys have to step up.
You know what, Sal? I've been, I guess, to some people, overly critical of Gabe Davis this season. Not for the playoffs. So for like he came out last game and he already shut me up. But I feel like this season, maybe expectations for me were a little too high, or I don't know. But I just feel like based on what we thought we were going to see, or what I thought we were going to see, he just hasn't had the same type of production. And then people throw out numbers and they're like, you compare this to other wide receiver 2s around the league, and he's pretty darn good. But I mean, am I wrong by saying, or am I wrong with that feeling like, hey, he hasn't really shown up the way, we would expect?
I think the word you're looking for is maybe inconsistency.
Mhm.
There's just been times where he's been inconsistent, a couple drop passes here or there. The Baltimore game wasn't a good game for him. And then the finale against the Patriots, I guess, right, would have been the other one, right? Which one am I thinking of? There was a one, towards the end of the year. I think it was that one. But either way, yeah, it's just, you didn't get maybe the consistency you wanted, but he can only also do with what opportunities he has, right? And how many targets he gets. And sometimes, it's also tougher for him because he is the guy that is the bigger play guy down the field. Those are tougher to get sometimes. Those are tougher
Mhm.
opportunities to make catches. Look at the Pittsburgh game though, and the 2 catches he made, those long catches. So I don't fault anyone for being critical of Gabe. I think though you have to put it in context of what he's being asked to do and how often he can do it. And that's always tough. I think that's the issue I have, which is I think he could be. I'd like to see him be a bigger part of the offense, but maybe that means he has to be in a different role sometimes and not just this bigger play guy down the field, which is great. Love seeing it. But I think he can also help maybe in other areas sometimes, and maybe they don't use him enough that way. But he's got to be more consistent. And like I said, the Patriot game, the Baltimore game, maybe a little bit too inconsistent. But he's playoff Gabe. Stepped up again in the
Yeah.
playoffs. This guy
Yeah.
has some of the best playoff stats of anybody over the last 3 years.
He absolutely shut me up already this past Sunday. So I'm not going to be critical of him anymore. It's playoffs. Do your thing, Gabe. Well, look, I don't have much time with you tonight, so I wanted to kind of just ask some other things. So you've been covering the team now for how long?
Covering them professionally for 11 years. I've been the sideline. This is my ninth year on the sidelines.
Okay, so overall covering them, this is about half the time they were not as good, and then half the time now they've
Right,
been
but let's
pretty
remember,
good.
I mean, like I grew up in Buffalo as a Bills fan, and what's funny
Mhm.
is I was doing this before this was this. Like
Right.
when podcasting and video casting was, especially podcasting in its infancy, back in I remember it was like 2006, 2007. I started. Nobody knew what podcasting was. There was this network. It's a whole nother story we can get into sometime. But there was this whole thing. This guy started this network of podcasters, and I was podcasting when no one knew what it was. And some people maybe remember that's when the whole Terrell Owens thing came down, that I
Mhm.
broke that story and those kinds of things. But what happened was, back then, people, if you did something like this, you'd be like, people were making fun of me. Like, who's this guy? What's this podcast? Who's it? This guy's in mom's basement, right? That was what I was doing. I was doing this kind of thing while I was teaching down in Florida. And then, I was in radio originally and I left it. And that was my avenue back in. And then I came back up to Buffalo to work at WGR in 2011. So I hope that's a long way of answering it, but I just think it's an interesting story.
No, no, it is. But I guess so for me, I was just wondering. So like the experience is completely different. I would
Yeah.
think, and so the years that they weren't as good, obviously, week 17, season's over, or even, but not
Yeah.
even just that, but the type of team we have, I feel like the interaction between the coaching staff and the players with the media is completely different than it used to be. I feel just outside looking in, I just feel like it's a completely different experience. So what has this year and like the past few years been like for you that's different than when you first started covering them professionally?
Yeah, it's been very different. Remember, you have whole PR staffs have changed over as well. You know how that communication piece works, how we cover the team, what we're allowed to do, not allowed to do, things like that. Um, I just think just like everybody else, it's the expectations. You go into a season where, during the drought and it's like, hope they could be okay. And the season is kind of about is the questions are, is the quarterback the guy, right? And
Hmm.
looking at college games and the draft, and by Halloween and Thanksgiving, we're thinking, oh, well, there's a college game on this weekend. Maybe that could be the guy. And now it's more like you found the guy, like it's Josh Allen, that. Now you're covering the players of these guys that are really some of the best in the league at their position. And the expectations have grown, no doubt about it. Covering this team, how about I'll say it this way, there's not as much drama at all because back
Yeah.
before all of this, there was always drama with the Buffalo Bills. Not to say there's never any right now, but it was always something, right? It was fighting between Doug Marrone and Doug Whaley or Rex Ryan and whoever
Yeah.
the new coach coming in and new GM was, all that stuff. The synergy and the consistency of this organization now makes it so much easier, I think, on all of us. But I'll also say, as they get better and as they go down this path, it also becomes harder in some ways to cover them because the doors close a little bit more, right? I mean, they're a little more protective of everything because they're trying to win a championship, right? I mean, Spence, you don't get anything out of that building anymore. Anything. Nobody gets
Yeah.
anything, right? It's very rare. Like, I mean, I get pieces of information there. Other people get pieces of information here. but nothing that's really kind of salty and like, oh my gosh, type of stuff. Like it's very, very buttoned up there because this is an organization that cares about all of those little details. Whereas in years past, there'd be a lot of loose lips around there. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, I remember too. And before I even was doing podcasting, you could kind of find stuff out on a whim and like come out the next day or 2 days later, and it was actually true. Now, yeah, you're right. It's like you're pulling teeth to get anything out of there unless you like really know somebody who just and they don't talk though. They don't talk. So really, you don't know anybody like that. But so now it's also because the Bills are better, the eyes on Western New York are bigger. There are more eyes. I've seen you on several shows now. I've seen you on the Pat McAfee show. I've seen you do all these other things. What has that been like for you? Because doing radio and being, I don't want to say you're a local guy, but being in Buffalo,
Mhm.
and then now it's like the demand for, hey, we want to interview Sal. How has that been for you?
It's awesome. I love it. I would be lying to you if I said I didn't. I love the fact that I get to have this, exposure and do what I love and do it in different markets and different people around the country. No doubt about it. But to be honest with you, I love it, not really for me as much as I love it for the fact that it gives Buffalo exposure. And I have an
Yeah.
opportunity to talk about Buffalo, to talk about the people, talk about the city, talk about this team. The question you just asked me about, what's changed. I get that question all the time from people. Not as much anymore. It's been 5 years, but it used to be for, 2, 3 years into McDermott's run. Like, wow, what's the difference here in Buffalo? And I love that. And I just try to be as available as I can for everybody. I can't say yes to everyone because I don't have the time, but I try. I really do. And
Mhm.
somebody will contact me and say, hey, can you come on this show or that show? And I'll say, hey, I can't at that time. Is there another time you can make it work? And if we can't make it work, we can't make it work. So I try to be as available as I possibly can. And part of the reason is because I know from my end how hard it is sometimes if I want to get a guest on my show and I'm bothering people in their time. And, I want to make sure I'm as flexible to people because I know what it's like trying to get someone and trying to fit it in their schedule because they're busy. So, you try to help each other out as much as you can. But it's fun. There's no doubt. There's a little bit of pressure there because you got to try and get all this in. You're trying to do your own job, but it helps us. It helps me professionally. It helps me personally. But I think more than anything, it just shines a light on Buffalo. And I'm a positive guy, as you know. I'm not the hot take media guy, and I'm
Yeah,
not the guy
yeah.
that's going to just be dragging everybody down and burning it all. I know that there's a thing, and people say, "Well, Sal, he's a homer and he's all this, whatever." I mean, you know what it is? I try to be fair and I try to be positive and optimistic, and I think that comes out in the way I report. And if people don't like it, then whatever, they can choose to listen to, watch, or read someone else.
I don't really understand how people cannot like the way especially if you're a Bills fan. I don't get how you cannot like the way you report. And I'm not saying that because you're on the show, but you're right. You don't really speak negatively about people. You don't, you would
But that
think,
doesn't mean you can't be critical. I think
right.
that's the
You got to be
the difference,
honest.
right? If I said, like last week, for example, I criticized the fourth quarter play calling of Ken Dorsey, right? At the end of the
Mhm.
game when they're trying to throw deep, whether it was him or Josh's decision. I'm like, Josh made bad decisions, Ken Dorsey made bad calls, whatever it is, that's what I do. But just because I don't, do it in a certain way, I think comes off as, maybe people thinking I'm protecting. I'm not. This is the way that I go about it. I don't think you have to be someone who has to go scorched earth on people or be rude or anything like that in order to have a critical opinion.
No, I agree with you. And that, for the most part, that's how I try to kind of carry myself as well. I try to give as much love as I can in the areas that I'm passionate about it. And then, just be honest and critical, but not overly negative when I don't like something. But so look, I got you for about 5 more minutes before you get on out of here. There's somebody who I wanted to be able to say hi to you because this guy loves you. I know you love him. What's up, Big O? My man Jerry is in the building.
What's going on? Hey,
Cheerio,
what's up,
what's up,
Sal?
buddy? How are you,
Yes,
my
what's
man?
up? I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. You look great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I'm trying to keep my girlish figure. You know what I'm saying?
Were you on with Bulldog a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I was. I actually was. It was good to talk to him, man. It's been a while. I mean, this
Yeah.
you talk about doing this stuff in 2006 and starting all this podcasting, vidcasting. It's been awesome. I mean, between this and Twitter, just reconnecting with people and getting to talk about the team I love, it's been great.
Yeah, no kidding. And you're the same thing like me. I was just talking about, different personalities and, being in this business. And, Eric Wood said something to me recently, and it just it made me feel really good. And, it's kind of the thing we're talking about. And he goes, through all the times we went through the drought and all the times we weren't making the playoffs, he said, you were like the only media guy who came in the locker room and didn't have a negative attitude every single day to drag everybody down. You just wanted to talk about football and, and ask questions that, even brought us up. And that made me feel really good. And, but again, some people will say, oh my God, well, you're such a homer or whatever. It's not the way I look at it. I'm just a positive guy, but I look at you, a guy who's played in the locker room and things like that. And you know what it's about, right? I mean, you're just blood, sweat, and tears, and you're trying your hardest. You're doing everything you can to be successful. And, I think there's something to be said for that. And you have to keep that in mind all the time.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's funny. And we appreciate as players, we appreciate guys like you to come in and do that. But we also understand that there is sometimes questions have to be asked.
Of course.
It's just part of the game. And like, I've always respected Bucky Gleason when he was doing this. I thought Bucky was very fair. I think Mark Gahn was very fair with us. I mean, there's times when they had to ask tough questions. And they didn't do it in a detrimental way, or they didn't do it in a put down way. They did it in a very business-like way, and you answered those questions, and you were held accountable because they did it professionally and it was with respect. So, it can be done both ways. But it's always great. Like I said, this has been awesome. I wish I was reconnected back during COVID times. Been able to do this stuff. It'd have been great therapy. But love seeing everybody. Love seeing you. Listen to you all the time. Listen to you on the radio, on the Bills stuff, when I go on the Bills app, and I can hear you on there before games and everything. It's been real good.
Hey, before we end this, I know, I'll say this, and I think, you'll echo, and I'll give you a chance to say something. Our buddy John Murphy, he had a stroke a couple weeks ago, and he hasn't been calling the games. I know Murph real well, and you go back to him, calling games. He calls games since the mid '80s, and he won't be on the call again this week. And we're just all thinking about him. I know you are, Jerry, and I know if you want to say something about him, I just figured I'd open up that door here on Spence's show just to say something, because I know you know him really well.
No, it's been awesome. John's a wonderful man. He's another guy that's always one of those guys that always comes to you with a smile on his face, always comes to you in a great mood and a very positive individual. And, he did something that many people don't understand how hard it was to do. And that was take over for the great Van Miller. And he filled those shoes. He's taken that position and gone to another level with it. Right. And I think as a fan base and even as players, there's things that you go to that are comforting to you, that even in times of turmoil, in times of uneasiness, there's always something you can go to that's comforting. John's voice is one of those things. You go to his voice, right? You always know he's going to be there. I'm an Eagles fan by birth. Merle Reese is that for me with Philadelphia, okay? And I grew up listening to radio. I grew up having the earpiece in my ear in my bed, listening to Harry Callis and listening to Richie Ashburn and all those guys. So radio is a big deal to me. And I actually had an opportunity to do a lot of radio in my life. But I hope he gets better, because that's a piece that is missing, especially with a team that has an opportunity to go for a championship. And to me, it would just be awful if he wasn't able to be a part of that, and be in that stadium when we're playing for that championship, calling that game. So, Godspeed to John. I hope he gets better. I know he'll get better. He's a tough guy. He's a fighter. He's a low guy. But, hopefully we hear him soon.
No doubt. Hey, by the way, speaking of Eagles media, Howard Eskin, man, he's a character. I've had him on the radio. What a great dude. I know you love him.
By the way, I want to tell you something before you leave, Sal. I thought it was BS that they threw snowballs at you on the sidelines at a Miami game. I was there, okay? I was in the stands.
We were close.
Now, I will say this. If that was Howard Eskin, they should have hit him with everything they had. But they shouldn't have hit.
It's all good, man. It's all good. Made it so better. The Bills won.
Sal, I was so mad. I tweeted it. I'm like, when I find the person.
That's right. I mean, Sal's doing a great job. They're throwing snowballs at me. Come on now.
The head is good target practice, I guess. I don't know.
I understand.
Well, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Sal is actually going to go and do his podcast. But if you want to plug that really quickly before you get on out of here, and then we'll let you go.
Yeah, it's actually Always Game Day in Buffalo with Matt Bove. It's on the Odyssey app, iTunes, Spotify. But we actually did 2 segments from down at the facility today during practice. And now we're going to go and hook up with Joe Goodberry, who covers the Bengals, as you guys know. He's going to be on the last segment. So all that's going to be wrapped up real nice and be out there tonight or tomorrow. So I appreciate that. And of course, the Extra Point Show every day, 10 to 12 at WGR, my great co-host, Joe DiBiase.
Sal, thank you so much, man. I appreciate everything you do, man.
Yeah, nice surprise, Jerry. Great seeing you, buddy.
Hey,
Take
Sal,
care of
good
yourself,
talking to
man.
you, man. Get a
Let's
hold
hook
of me
up
again,
again. All
man.
right.
Yeah, we'll do.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right, bye-bye.
Big O. So now for the second half of the show, like I said, Sal is going to do his pod, and then Big O is filling in with me because
Hey,
again,
thanks for
Joe is.
doing that, man. Thanks for doing
Oh,
that. I was glad I got a chance to say hi to Sal. I didn't have a chance to when I went up there.
yeah.
Good dude, man. Does a really good job.
That's why I tried to. That's why I asked the time. I wanted you to
Yep.
have that opportunity to catch up with him. Sal is the man, and I know anybody who's met him or anybody who's been around him in that building, it's hard not to love him, man. Like he's a really good dude, really good dude. So, but let's get into it, man. What's your thoughts? What's your feelings about this weekend?
I think this weekend's going to be, this is going to be as big of a game as we've had all season. I think it's going to be. I expect a very very physical football game. And here's what I'm looking at. Okay, if I look at teams, and I saw it with Miami, I saw it with the Bengals. Before that, when we had the unfortunate incident of having to call the game short, I think teams are going into their meeting room. This is just me, okay? I think Team Spence are going in their meeting rooms on Tuesday or Wednesday. I guess Wednesday would be the day, and they're saying, "Look, are the Bills good? Yeah, they're good. They're dynamic on offense. They run on defense, but we're tougher than they are." I think that there's a lot of teams right now that think that they can push the Bills around a little bit. I really do. I think that's why Mixon's chirping. I think it's why he chirped last game. I think you looked at the Dolphins; they brought it. They didn't back down. Hell, they fought in the tunnel, and I was excited to hear that we were doing a little bit of that in the tunnel. Okay, that just shows the character of a football team. But right now, I think there's some teams that think that they can push the Bills around. So this game this weekend, I think, is going to be really physical.
Well, I mean, if they think they can push the Bills around, they must not have seen that hit that Tremaine Edmonds laid on. I don't even remember who it was. I just remember bodies being on the field. Tremaine Edmonds
Right.
is laying guys out, and they must not have seen Matt Milano play against the Jets. Or, I mean, I'm not going to go down a list of games and guys, but I'm going to tell you what, you don't want to run into Taron Johnson across the middle of that doggone field.
Right, and I get that. You know that. I know that. That locker room knows that, but I'm just telling you, I think that is really if you're going to attack Buffalo, I think that's what people are saying to themselves. We're going to get up in them. We're going to see if we can get them to flinch. We're going to see if we can get them to take some penalties they shouldn't take. I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see that this is a really, really chippy game. It's going to be chippy early. And I think a big part of this football game, Spence, is going to be how this officiating crew handles that chippiness early. Do they set the tone, or do they allow it to happen and things get out of hand? So I think the first 15 minutes are going to be a big deal.
Yeah, I do too. I think because the way they came out that first game that in week 17 before it was suspended, I think, and I read this earlier too, but it makes sense. They're very confident about coming into this building and their offense up against our defense. But I do think there's a huge difference with how the offensive line is now as opposed
Right.
to what it was week 17. And for me, I'm looking to see some exotic, not too exotic, because I know we haven't done it that much all year, but I want to see some pressure from our defense in different ways, blitz the quarterback different ways, get to him, and I don't want him to have time back there to throw it, because
Right.
when these receivers get the ball, man, it's over. And so I don't want them to get the ball. What are you looking for our, and we'll get to offense, but what are you seeing from our defense that you want to, or what you want to see?
I think that's the biggest thing, and you said it. You said it perfectly. I think, Spence, you got to hit Josh Burrow, and you got to hit him early. You got to hit him a lot. Burrow is a cool cat. He likes to play that role, but it's been shown throughout his first so many years here, his first couple of years in the league. He's just like any other quarterback. He doesn't want to get beat up, and he's not really that big of a running threat. I mean, he's different than Josh. I think Josh wants to get hit. I want to see Josh get hit early because that usually gets him in the game a little bit.
Yeah.
But Burrow's not that guy. And I think that's going to be a big part of this as well. Can our defensive front get to him without blitzing? Because you know what happens when we blitz, right? That's going to leave somebody one-on-one. And Burrow's such a good quarterback. He knows where to go with the football. So they got to get after him. I think Rousseau is going to be a big factor. Hopefully Jordan Phillips is a factor in the middle. I still think We are the best defensive front we can be when Jordan Phillips is playing up front because we get pressure in the middle that doesn't allow that quarterback to step up. So hopefully he's ready to go after a week off. Rousseau has the game of his life. And, guys like Ed Reed, or not Ed Reed, Ed Reed. Guys like Ed, I had that video in my mind about Ed Reed talking about where he's
Oh
going to
man,
coach. But
did you see that?
no,
Yeah, we could
yeah,
talk
I
about
did
that in a
see it.
second. We could
Yeah, we
talk
can
about
talk
that in a
about that in
second.
a minute. But no, Ed Oliver, I think Ed's going to have to be active inside as well. Our guys are going to have to figure out a way to get pressure with 4 because we can get pressure with 4. That's going to allow us to play some coverage that we want to play.
That was one of the things that I actually brought up to Sal early in the episode. For some reason, I thought that even after Von Miller went down, that the Buffalo Bills were still doing a great job, not necessarily with sacks, but just quarterback pressure with rushing only 4.
Right.
We haven't been. It's declined. The production in that area has declined drastically. So I'm looking forward to seeing, with I don't want to call it a beat up offensive line because we thought Miami's offensive line was going to be beat up this last week,
Right.
and they still seem to do pretty good. So with the Bengals having some guys who aren't the starters, or they got some backups in there. I'm hoping that this is one of those games that we can really get pressure on Joe Burrow. Because if you look back just throughout his career, when they couldn't protect him, they didn't win. When they protect him, those guys
Right.
win. So to me, that's the entire key. Now, whether you use, and I know what you said, and I agree with you there. You don't want to get too exotic because then you're going to leave somebody open. But I've loved what I've seen at moments when they've used Taron Johnson in that way, or Matt Milano, or Tremaine Edmonds in that way to blitz the quarterback. I don't know how we're going to do it, but man, we got to get pressure on Joe.
Well, I think it's a big part of it, but I think part of that, Spence, and this to me is really the key of the key of the defense, and it has to do especially with how we like to play on the back end, which is a lot of zone coverage. I think that we're fast, we run really really well. How do you defeat speed on defense? Well, you get guys moving, seeing false reads, seeing ghosts. I don't want to see Mixon. Mixon started the game off last time we played him way too good. 5 yards a pop. They were running the football. They were moving the football. If they run the football, the play action game is big time. And to me, besides quarterback run game, play action is the best series of plays in football. And they do a good job of it if you let them get running downhill. So we're going to have to find a way to stop Mixon and company as well. It's going to be a tough task. But, if you look at us when we've played against these teams like Kansas City, I mean, we're going to have to score points. I mean, it might come down to us having to outscore them. It's just, do you get a big stop here and there? Can you get off the field when you need to? Can you cause a big turnover? And, can you outscore them? It'll be I think it's going to be a really, really good football game.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't quite get it to go this far with Sal, but I brought up Joe Mixon. I brought up how they have 2 running backs that are capable. But if I'm honest, man, I said this on another show. So if anybody's thinking that I'm switching it up now, I'm not. Like, I can post the receipts. But I feel like Joe Mixon talks a whole lot for a guy who averages less yards per carry than Zach Moss. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he's not the guy that he talks like. Now, do I think he's a good? Yeah, he's good. He's a good running back, but for some reason, it just hasn't worked out to the way that you would expect with a player as talented as Joe Mixon. He's just not. I don't know if he's just not hitting holes properly. I don't know if they're not blocking properly. If it's a different scheme that he should be. I don't know. But for a guy who just doesn't, he talks a whole lot. And then on top of that, the Buffalo Bills. I get it. Last season, we couldn't stop the run. That was our Achilles heel. If we couldn't stop the run, we lost. This year, we've had 4 games, maybe 3.5 games, because really it was only half of that Green Bay game, but it was all second half. They destroyed us. But it's been 3.5, 4 games this season that we couldn't stop the run. The Buffalo Bills are an elite run defense team. And a lot of times we think about what used to be, and then we kind of get caught up in that. I don't think the Buffalo Bills are really too concerned with the run game. I think what it comes down to is, do we want to kind of not forget about the run game, but do we want to just play our game and make sure we focus on Joe Burrow? And then if the run game beats us, so be it. But I don't think they're too focused on that.
I understand what you're saying, but I also think that a lot of this the play action game with Cincinnati is good when they can do it, and I think we're susceptible to play action. I really do. We've got a lot of guys in that back end that like to stick their face up in the run game and make tackles, and they're good at it. That 4-2-5, you better have a box safety that can roll downhill and make plays. So that's where I worry about this whole thing. Are we willing to just give them 5-6 yards a carry if we have to? I don't know. That's something for the coaches to figure out. But I do believe we've got to make sure we control that play action game of Cincinnati, because it is potent when it gets going.
Shout out to my man John here. He says, can we just acknowledge the lack of respect our defense gets nationally since Von went down? Trey is more confident than 3 weeks ago. Will they attack 7 with the run game by making them play in the box? Or will they attack 7 with the run game by making them play in the box?
Right. That's the point I was making earlier. And Seven's my guy. Seven's my guy that likes to get a little bit. He likes to get a little bit downhill sometimes too quick. The offenses have a way of maybe putting him in limbo a little bit sometimes, where he has to make a tough decision. I don't know about lack of respect nationwide. I mean, our rankings are there. I mean, if you look at the rankings in the NFL, I mean, we're pretty favorable. But I will say Von not playing does hurt us, because Von's a lot like Bruce was. Von gets a lot of credit for being Mr. Pass Rush. Von played the run really, really well, and Von's able to shut down a side on the running game, especially with contain. He plays contain really well. And so I think, Von's ability to play the run, not having him in there, hurts us just as much as his pass rush ability.
And it sucks too, because first it sucks that he got injured, but it sucks that at the time that he got injured, we're also going to miss him probably for half, next season. And it just sucks that could you imagine what this defense really would have looked like if we could have had Von with Micah and Jordan and Trey, like just a healthy defense, everybody that we have on this team for a season. I just don't think that the way we started this year off, nobody was going to stop us.
No, I think that we had the pieces in place. And, the thing that people don't really want to put focus on or want to realize is when a guy like Von Miller gets hurt, yeah, he's a huge part of it. But now all of a sudden there's this big shift. There's this big paradigm shift of who has to go where. And now all of a sudden Russo's got to play Von's spot. And all of a sudden, we got to shift this dude. And so now you're weaker in multiple spots because you got to move guys around. And, I thought with Von in the game, Russo is getting ready to and I still think he's having a breakout year. If you really pay attention to him, he's rushing the passer one-on-one as good as I've seen him. I mean, he's really playing well. I think he's really producing on the field. But if you put Von there and you put him on the other side, it's kind of that Clyde Simmons, Reggie White effect. Okay, Reggie's over here getting 3 guys on him. Clyde's rushing against one dude, and you're getting all these sacks, and everybody's like, Clyde Simmons is amazing. Well, yeah, he is amazing, but Reggie's on the other side. Or, in the 85 Bears, you talk about Richard Dent and Wilbur Marshall. So when you have 2 of them, your productions, goes up pretty well. But, again, like we talked about, without Von in there, Russo's going to have a huge day, as is the rest of that defensive line.
Yeah, huge. No, let's switch it to the other side, where your area, I know you're a football player in general, but where your area of expertise as a pro is. Our offensive line, man, is it to blame? Is the offensive line play to blame, or is it Josh making too many mistakes? Is he holding the ball too long, or what? Because, we're starting to see some fumbles. We're seeing some, obviously the interceptions, but then a few of the interceptions over the last few weeks have been when there's pressure and he's kind of like, kind of being hit when he falls down or whatever the case may be. What's going on with our O-line?
I do think we have some issues up front. I think some of it has to do with the healthiness of some of our players. I think some guys are playing hurt, but I'm not going to. I don't know if I'm the only one in this fan base that will actually place blame upon 17. And I've got 17's jersey on, so I paid my money, so I can do that.
Well, it's not a jersey, but I got some Josh too.
But it's like those picks, I mean, the one pick was a deflection, but those picks they just cannot happen. But this isn't about him and his carelessness with the football, because he's careless with it when he runs as well, the way it's held away from his body. But yeah, our offensive line needs to pick it up. 7 sacks last week. They did do a good job a few times. We had some touchdowns, some big plays on blitz pickup. They brought 5 or 6. We picked it up and we made touchdowns. But we have to get better outside, Spence. And
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I love Dion. Dion's one of my favorite dudes, and I know he's an alternate or whatever. I don't know if he's having his best year. I think he's got to play a little better. I think Brown is hurt. If I watch him when he plays, I think he's beat up. I think Spencer is beat up a little bit. I think he's gritting it out. I think if we really knew how hurt he was, we'd be amazed. And then the other thing is this. I mean, how many times has that group played with the same 5 guys week in and week out? They've had a ton of turnover in there with guys out, Morris being out, Bates being out, Brown being out, Quisenberry's in, Quisenberry's out, Quisenberry's back in, but he's got a high ankle sprain. So they haven't had as much continuity either. Call it what it is. They do play really well in spurts, but they do have a few bad moments.
See, I agree with you with that. Like a lot of times during the game, I'm an emotional tweeter. So when something happens, I'll go ahead and tweet out like, man, and I kind of got some blowback. Was it last week or the week before when Josh threw an interception? It's just like, Josh, what are we doing here, man? We're making these certain throws that you just shouldn't even make. Part of that. So my question when we're talking about Josh and the turnovers now, is it just that Josh has his pedal to the metal? Or, I mean, could it be that our offensive coordinator should probably put him in a different position? Like, hey, this isn't the call. We're going to make these calls to where you don't have to throw a 20-yard or 30-yard bomb on first down. We got three plays to get another first down. Is it a combination of that, or what do you see when you look at that?
Well, what did we talk about when Dybul was here? Okay, we almost complained that we didn't throw the ball downfield enough. Okay, we talked about how we were throwing our running plays. Okay, I know that's a 3-yard completion. That's a running play in his book. That's a running play in his book. And we were throwing these little high percentage passes. We didn't throw the ball downfield very much. Now it seems like we don't have any of that. We talked about bringing Nyheim Hines in to be that back. He hasn't even had a chance to be that back. And we've become this beautiful. It's almost like beautiful chaos. They talked about it the other day. This thing is all over the place, and yet we come out with 30-some points every game. And I don't know. I have to think, if you look at this, maybe this is the Dybul Dorsey effect. I mean, look at the Giants. I mean, he took a quarterback that people were calling a first-round bust, and now all of a sudden they're talking about Daniel Jones like he's the greatest quarterback in the league.
Yeah, they want to extend him.
Right, they want to extend him. So I think that Dybul was just a much more high percentage, systematic, almost kind of West Coast type feel to his offense, to where Dorsey's more of a, I don't know if you want to call this Air Coryell. You want to call it 4 verticals. He wants to throw the ball downfield. Now, with that being said, Josh sometimes is guilty of trying to extend plays that he probably needs to get rid of the football. Yeah. He's got a little bit of that, and I saw this on Phoenix show. I thought this term was wonderful by Tasker. I'd never heard it before. He's got a little bit of what they call arm arrogance, right? Yeah. That his arm and his ability can solve any problem. Well, it can also cause a lot of problems too. And he's just got to just think about that game this past weekend. If he's not careless with the football, the one pick I'm not giving to him, the deflection I'm not giving to him. Honestly, that was holding on the break. I mean, the one on Beasley where the pick was on Beasley, that was holding on the break, and they didn't call it. But you've got to know your situations. You got to have a little bit of situational awareness, and it's not just. And the thing is, it's not just the downfield stuff. If you watch him scramble, the ball is out here a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I know he's 6'5" and he can raise it over a lot of people, but I'm going to go back to the great Marv Levy, what he used to tell our running backs all the time. Marv used to say, and I apologize, but he used to say, carry the football like you like your ladies' skirts, high and tight. Okay. that was old sweet Marv. That was a Marvism, right? But he's right. I mean, he's
That's a
right.
good
You
one.
got to cover the points of the ball up, and you got to protect it with your life. And when they flash that deal on the screen, Spence, we have 20. What do we got? 28 or 29 takeaways, but we had 27 takeaways, but we have 27 or more giveaways. I mean, that's a big deal. To think where we are, to think how good we are, and the record we have, and we've got that kind of stat. That's saying something.
Yeah, and I mean, even to your point, and I heard Fina say this the other night as well. You're right. We sit there and we're kind of upset about the turnovers, or we're upset about the carelessness, and then you look up and we got 34 points, and it's like,
It's
what the
nuts.
heck?
It's
Just
nuts.
it's insane.
I mean, it's totally insane. It makes no sense.
It's like, can you imagine what this team would be like if they actually minimized turnovers?
Right. And the thing is where is that coming from? Where is that coming from? And the more I watch it, the more it's our offensive mentality right now. And we want to throw the ball downfield. We want to go 4 verticals. We want to press the DBs on the other team. We want to try to hit the big play. And I'd like to see this week. I really hope to see this week that we try to establish Cook and Motor more.
Man,
I really think that's what we need to do. And the other thing is this, and you're going to hate this, and most people do, but I'm sorry, it's put up or go home time. It's either advance or get a tee time. 17's got to he's got to run the rock, baby. We got to roll downhill with him.
No. I don't hate that. I hate
run
that.
The ball with him.
I hate that in week 3 when you can win the game other ways. But when it's playoffs and it's like my viewpoint on that is like, look, run Josh in critical moments. To me, divisional round football is critical. You run, like that's your best weapon. I know his arm is a bazooka. He can throw it 60 yards on a dime, and like I know it. Josh Allen is your greatest weapon. They're not gonna. We still haven't run him, I think, the way that we should. I miss the play calls when we used to set up 2 offensive linemen and our biggest wide receiver and our tight end to kind of be a wall in front of him.
Yeah.
Every time you think it's going to get 3 or 4 yards, and he ends up gaining 20 yards on that play. Why don't we do that in the red zone? We used to be one of the greatest teams in the red zone when it comes to scoring efficiency because Josh Allen had like 6 touchdowns in the red zone. Now, all of a sudden, you look at it, we're not horrible. You know what I'm saying? But
right.
Man, we could be a whole lot better if we use Josh Allen the way he's supposed to be used. But before we get out of here, we got a few minutes left. You mentioned that Ed Reed tape, or that tape, as you see, I'm talking now. I sound
right.
So like as a kid, but the Ed Reed recording when he was talking about how it was dirty and they weren't cleaning things. He didn't clean out his office. Wow, just crazy the things that we're seeing. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think Ed went and purchased the Dion, the Coach Prime handbook and he's following it word for word, line for line. Part 1, I believe, is the chapter about challenging your employer. And I think he made it a point, and I think that I think things will get taken care of. And I think it's part of that whole, trying to hold people accountable. If you want us to be excellent, you got to be excellent too. You've heard all the stories about Marv and how he said that we should you treat the guy that cleans the locker room up just like you treat me. And it's the truth. I mean, it takes everybody, right? And I think that's what Ed was getting to. I'll tell you what, I am the biggest Ed Reed fan there is. I love Ed Reed. I think he's one of the best players of all time. I mean, people talk about the greatest safety of all time being Ronnie Lott. I don't know, man. I think Ed's right there with him. Tremendous player.
Ed or Troy for me.
Oh, yeah?
Troy
Polamalu?
Yeah, he was different, man. But no,
Troy
I'm
was different. Ed. I think Ed had a little bit of – I think Ed in a crunch could have played a little bit of corner if he had to.
Yeah.
I really do. I don't know if Troy could have, but just something about Ed I always enjoyed. But, no, it's it's going to be a wonderful game. I mean, I was doing a little bit of research before I came on. Sarah and I, the 3-man rush on Thursday, we're going to get into a little bit of Senior Bowl. I'm going to talk a little bit. I got some quarterbacks and linemen that we're going to talk about. But, if you look at all these quarterbacks nowadays that are all coming out, they're all Josh Allen. When I say they're all Josh Allen, they're all running quarterbacks. All these quarterbacks nowadays can run the football. They can all run the QB run game. So the NFL better get on with it, because if they don't, they're going to lose a big portion of the talent that's coming into the league. And a guy like Josh can definitely be a trendsetter.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate your shameless plug there for 3-Man Rush. I was going to ask you to go ahead and plug that, but you already did. But go ahead and go for it again before we get on out here. Let everybody know when your content is coming out.
3-Man Rush on Thursday night, myself and Sarah Larson. We're going to talk about the NFL playoff games. We're going to talk about Senior Bowl and more. That is 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central, right here on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network, brought to you by Picasso's Pizza, Buffalo's best pizza.
I love it. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate y'all kicking it with me. Like I said, for my man Joe Miller, he's out and about with John Fina, creating trouble somewhere down there in Florida. So had the big old fill in for him, and it was always a pleasure to have Sal Capaccio join us as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all know how I do it over here. Y'all love each other, take care of each other, and live in peace. And as always, stay positive, test negative, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Yeah, you got to say it, man. You got to say it.